wait for my panelists to join me. There they are. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're so excited about this panel. Welcome to this MSP and Traction Complete event. We are here today to talk everything about avoiding territory disputes with account hierarchies with the experts at Traction Complete. And I'm so excited about this, especially because it's Friday. So if you're in the audience, please go in the chat and tell me if you have any fun plans for this weekend. But for right now, we are going to learn everything about territory disputes with account hierarchies. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. My name is Eduardo. I am a community events manager and your host for the next hour. And for those of you not familiar with MSP, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our modern sales pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and to help them see around corners they might not know about. We do that through live sessions like this one you're about to experience today, and a robust online forum and our quarterly summits. And we are starting to get back to in-person events, which is very exciting. If you're not already part of the MSP family, you'll be invited to join us after this event. Um, Today's session wouldn't be possible without the sponsorship from the team in Traction Complete. So thank you, Traction Complete, for this panel. And I want to remind you that this event is the second masterclass of a series of 4. So if you missed the first one, I'm pasting a link right now in the chat so you can go ahead and watch the recording after this event, and then you're going to see the recording of this event in there too. But before I pass the mic to our experts, I have some housekeeping notes. And we are going to talk about challenges with territory disputes, but we will love everyone to hop into the pool feature in the right-hand side of your screen. I'm going to open it right now and answer the question in there for you to pick the biggest impact of territory disputes and account conflicts on your businesses. We have we have 6, different options for you to choose. So pick anything that you want. And while you answer your poll, I want to let you know that you will be able to access this recording and the key takeaways from our panelists on the previous events page on the MSP website. And if you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function and we'll be sure to get to them during the event. Now let's get introduced to the one and only David Nelson. He is the CEO of Traction Complete, and his work is to help hundreds of organizations like DocuSign, Cisco, and Asana solve complex data issues in Salesforce. That sounds like really impressive. He's got 18 years of experience designing softwares. So I'll pass it over to Dave to take us through the session today. Dave, it's your time to shine.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you so much, Eduardo. And I like that, the one and only. I wish that was true. There is a ton of David Nelsons out there, not all that unique. But yeah, thank you for having me. I've been a member of the Modern Sales Pros community for, I think, 6 years now. And I'm super impressed with the attitude of everyone. Everyone helping one another and learning from one another, both personally and professionally. It's pretty special. So hopefully we can actually contribute something back today. But yeah, what do we do? Traction, we build software that helps simplify that kind of data complexity in Salesforce. I think everyone on the call knows and is all too familiar with how data can become a mess in Salesforce, right? You have dirty data, empty records that aren't linked. And that causes all of these struggles when you're trying to do your reporting or your territory planning. And so our apps help to try and bring a little bit of order to that chaos by automatically linking accounts into hierarchies, by matching leads to accounts, by cleaning up duplicates, and then providing automation to help facilitate territory. So yeah, thank you for having me. And I think I get the pleasure of introducing our next guest, Matt Wester. So Matt is an expert in revenue operations and sales with over a decade of experience at companies like ADP and Capato, wherein he brings a really unique lens to this conversation because he spent years in both the sales arena and on the operations side. So he's both received territories and had to work them and now had to create them and facilitate them. So Matt, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, Dave, thanks. Happy to be here. Definitely worked in both sales and in sales ops. And early on, I saw as this technology was increasing and the sales technology space was growing, that eventually this would get bigger. And so after years of fighting other reps for accounts, I figured I'd hop to the other side of things and help companies leverage this technology and create efficiencies and hopefully get their sales ramped up quicker.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on the phone in the same situation. Yeah, let's dig in. Today, we are talking about the 5 tactics to avoid territory disputes. And I think at best, territory disputes are a major frustration, but most of the time, they're a huge drain on the efficiency of both the sales team and the go-to-market operations team. And judging by the popularity of this session, it sounds like there's a lot of people suffering from that same problem. So if you can pop up the agenda there, I think what we're going to try and do is first start by digging into the problem, right? Whenever I'm trying to solve a problem, I try to dig into why, right? Why does the problem exist? And that helps us then determine how we can solve that problem. And so we're going to start by hearing from Matt on the source of the account conflicts that's causing that chaos and what kind of downstream effects that has. And then we're going to move into the tactics themselves that you guys have come to find out. And at the end, we'll have a little bit of time for a live Q&A. So Matt, let's start at that source. What have you found to be where these problems stem from?
Topic of the day, dirty data, really. Dirty data, and it's kind of a two-pronged issue. I think the other side of that is unclear guidelines. One of those being strong can help supplement the other, such that if you've got maybe 2 government accounts and one ends up in a vertical that's not a government vertical, if everybody's very clear on the policy and how that works, reps would then know, even if it ends up in their territory, that that's probably not something they should be calling. And so really, I think the source of it is a little bit of both. Lack of communication across the organization, silos within the organization, between sales, between ops, between revenue, between marketing. And of course, just dirty data, having duplicates, not understanding families of accounts as it relates to their corporate and legal structures. All of this, I think, is where a majority of the confusion really stems from.
Yeah, I think you're right. We hear the same from all of our customers and ourselves. What kind of downstream effect does that have on yourself and your sales team?
So there's multiple different ways that can break out. As it pertains directly to myself, the impact starts, I guess, in the planning season with just the creation of the territories and trying to balance things and make sure that everything's equitable. And if we've got duplicate accounts, then you've got inflated TAM in some areas. If you've got a lack of visibility into these legal and corporate structures, then you may have various reps calling into the same buying teams or the same families, different BDR teams that may be aligned to your reps, all spamming the same email addresses in a sense. So it really flows not only an impact on the operations side of just spending the time to carve these things out to what you may think is balanced, just to have to redo it maybe mid-year again. But then you've got wasted sales efforts, time spent researching these accounts, digging into them, when maybe you have a peer counterpart that's also spending time that he could have put or she could have put into a different account, both into the same one, and then an actual customer impact of just receiving a bunch of spam from your company and, giving you a bad name. So I feel like it's not just a siloed issue, that it really can spread not only through the organization, but into those that you're also trying to get into.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That customer experience can be critical. I know that some companies actually have hard costs too. Like, do you ever end up having to pay double commissions?
Yeah, that's unfortunately unavoidable at times. So the strategy there becomes how we can mitigate that as much as possible. In an ideal world, it would not happen. But yeah, there's instances where maybe an op gets opened on an account that should be maybe with a different family or a different vertical. We've already got client involvement. We've already got a rep that's put time into this and maybe led a discovery call or a couple early on sessions before anybody realized that maybe this ties somewhere else. And the conversation really then goes to the commission that you're paying out on top of the rep that's getting the deal. Is that going to cost you more than maybe some of the frustrations that losing that work would cost you on the back end, and rep churn or lack of motivation or just an overall general unsettling feel within the company? And so a lot of times, if you can catch it early enough, instead of a double commission, we try to do a split of some sort if they're not going to carry the deal all the way to the end. And that's the goal, is trying to catch these things as soon as possible so you can avoid paying at least 2 full payments, if you will.
Totally. Yeah, but I like what you said though, because even paying that double can sometimes be more worthwhile. We've heard horror stories about really good reps leaving actually because they had acted appropriately, worked a lead to close, were right on the 1 yard line, and then found out it was actually somebody else's deal, and their rules of engagement said that the other rep would get the payment. And so, yeah, it can have major issues.
Yeah, a lot of times being cheap actually costs you more in the long run. So,
yeah,
you know.
Totally. Yeah, well, hey, thank you for running us through that. I know that we could probably talk about horror stories all day and problems, but everyone's here to listen to tactics. So just before we jump into the tactics, can we take a quick look at that poll, Eduardo, and see how this reflected for everybody else?
Yes, let's take a look at the poll. And I think the results are pretty impressive. So the most voted one is the time it takes to resolve an account conflict. And I said impressive because I see a lot of that in our robust online forum, people complaining about the time that it takes to resolve. So what do you think?
I mean, I totally agree. I want to hear from you.
Yeah, agreed. I was talking with others in the organization prior to this, and my direct boss, our VP of strategy, actually brought that up as one of his bigger pain points. And much like everything else, I guess, in nature, much like an infection, the longer you let that fester, the longer you let that go on, the more widespread impacts it can have. And so, yeah, the time it takes to get to these issues, the longer you let them go before making a decision, right or wrong, I feel can have exponential impacts the longer you let that go on.
Yeah, so true. All right, well, on that note, let's dive into what we can do about it to not let it fester, like that analogy. So yeah, the good news is that there are fundamental tactics and strategies that you can put in place to help avoid the territory disputes right from the get-go. And a lot of them end up using account hierarchies. So let's dive into strategy number 1. And that we decided, I think, using Matt's background, is that you need to set clear rules of engagement. So Matt, what is your best practice there for setting those rules for your team?
Best practice actually kind of goes into my second point, is getting clean data and getting these rules in place. You want everyone's buy-in as much as possible. Of course, you're not going to make everyone happy. But in order to figure out the rules that should be set in place, it really helps if you're looking at the right indicators and the right factors to help you make these determinations up front. But let's assume that you've got that in place. Getting your key stakeholders aligned on this and ultimately aligned with the entire go-to-market strategy as a whole, I think is crucial here. not necessarily having everybody agree, but to get their buy-in, to get commitment that we all acknowledge this is what's best and that we will adhere to the best of our ability. So it's not necessarily agreement. Getting an entire, especially a sales organization, to agree on one thing, I don't think is ever going to happen. But commitment and buy-in is, that's your word. So I think that's key to step one, because when these issues do come up, you can always revert back to that, and you can hold somebody accountable to their agreements, to their word. And I think that's a lot easier than just saying you're wrong.
Well, and I think you mentioned to me before that, so you actually have a policy that you put in place and get everyone bought in, maybe not agreed to, but signed off on. Is that right?
Yeah, like an example being, because we primarily target enterprise organizations, for instance, T-Mobile or a telecom operation, we're not interested in finding the buying team at the corner of their local downtown retail store that, they're not spending $1 million on Salesforce at that location. We're interested in org-wide approach. So one of those rules being whoever owns the parent owns the hierarchy, right? And if everybody can agree to that, then that rule's set in place. We know that's the case. And if you've got dirty data in an account that maybe aligns with that legal hierarchy, ends up in somebody else's territory, and an op gets started, it's identified then that mid-deal, this actually trees into this bigger company. Leaders have already agreed that they know the rules, that they've agreed to it, that that's the way it should go. And it's a lot easier to navigate that conflict when you've got some sort of previous agreement to fall back on.
Yeah, no kidding. And I like what you said last time we talked, that you make sure that they get bought into that before they actually see their territory, before all the disputes start, or the arguments start coming up.
Yeah, we want a non-monetary influenced agreement, if at all possible, a neutral conceptual agreement, something that's more based on a concept than, hey, this is going to benefit me if I agree to this, or maybe we should alter one of these exceptions such that it would benefit me in a way.
Totally. And so if I understood what you're saying in terms of the policies, you talked about accounts where they fall into a hierarchy for sure, and who should own that. Because I think it sounds like in your company, one person should own the entire family tree. We certainly have other customers where that's not the case, but they just need to have a clear rule, whatever it may be. What would be some other tactics, or some other items in that policy?
So within that, there's going to be some exceptions. And so this leads to 2 points. One, being able to proactively identify your exceptions and have your amendments in there as proactively as possible would help. An example is, for us, private equity and holding companies, people like Platinum Equity or Vista Partners, HGGC, Berkshire, Bain Capital. All these guys, they rarely have a managing interest in the companies that they're invested in. And so on a tool like Dun & Bradstreet or any other hierarchy tool, you may see that would be your global ultimate or your complete ultimate or whatever they're going to call it. But, Bain Capital is going to end up, let's say, in a finance vertical, should the gentleman operating that finance AE strategy also go into everything else they own within utilities, manufacturing, or whatever else they own. We've decided no, in those instances, it has to be a managing interest. If they don't have to call Warren Buffett to figure out if they can buy a DevOps tool or not, then we're not going to have it aligned that way. Everything would go to three fins verticals if that was the case. So, that's one exception to the rule of whoever owns the hierarchy owns everything down. So having those defined up front and agreed upon, not changing the rules halfway through. That's key. And then the second point from there is evading me at the moment, but really just trying to get in front of everything as quick as possible. There's always going to be some gray area. There's always going to be things come up that you didn't account for, one-offs, unique scenarios, and then that goes back to the infection example. Try and cut it off as soon as possible. Don't let that sit there. Don't let the time drag out. Fix it. Come up with a policy. Get everybody's buy-in. Roll it back out. Start back from step one.
Yeah, smart. Very smart. So Matt, that's probably a good time to move on to step two, because you already mentioned it actually at the beginning that when we think back to the source of a lot of these problems, it stems from that data, dirty data, unlinked kind of thing. And so we say that the next step that you need to take is really to clean that database up. So what are the steps that you guys actually take to clean that up in your exercise?
A lot of steps there. It's what I was doing all day before I got on this call, unfortunately. Identifying duplicates, right? That's probably step one. If you've got your BDR team with the ability to convert unmatched leads to new accounts, and let's say they're not well versed at scrubbing your database to identify those duplicates, you've up till now hopefully not created any sort of automation for that, or let's just say the lead didn't have enough data on it for the automation to make its match in the first place. New account gets created. This is a duplicate, gets segmented, sent off. So being able to have some steps in place where you can identify these duplicates help. I look at a report of new accounts created every week just to see where they end up matching and what's getting created and where we've got our dupes. Really, under this umbrella, the biggest piece of advice that I've got is get your data tools in place before your planning season. Catching up on all of this after you've pushed your territories out or you've done your restructuring creates so many peripheral issues at that point. And so when it comes to cleaning up your database, that needs to align with whatever your strategy is, what's important to you. Like us, we don't want retail locations. We only want headquarters. So it's really easy to identify if there's dupes, because I'm only looking at one or a handful of T-Mobile subs in that example, but really getting it in before your planning season. That's my best piece of advice. If you wait to do something about this until you've already put your cards on the table, you're going to have reps investing in, even before there's an op created, there's so much time spent just planning out for these account strategies, getting your contacts, loading them in, figuring out your title roles, and working with marketing, who's been engaging. I mean, before you've even got an op on the account, if you got to pull something from somebody, it could have real big repercussions. So, get this done before your fiscal.
Yeah, such a great point. We heard from another customer of ours, DocuSign, that they actually end up spending about half the amount of time in their major annual exercise of cleaning up their territories on cleaning up their database. And so I think the process that they take is they first make sure that all their records are enriched. And I think you were saying the same thing, Matt. So enriched with that firmographics, right? Make sure that whatever you're using for segmentation, if it's address, if it's number of employees, annual revenue, industry, or all the above, that's on those records first, so that then they can do a couple things. One, link their hierarchies, which then helps them to establish what are duplicates and then merge those together. Now, I think you were saying that you clean up your dupes first before linking the hierarchies. Either way, you want to make sure that you clean that up in order to give a better understanding, so that then you can go into your scoring when you're moving on to your actual territory definitions.
Yeah, I've been able to do both. Try and identify the dupes first, but then once you're able to link the hierarchies, that is a huge help in like picking up anything that you may have missed. it'll do a good job at pulling in other families, international accounts, anything that would maybe fall under a family that you didn't first check. So I kind of use a dual prong approach there. It's made a huge difference in how we were doing this before.
Nice. That's great. I think that's probably a good segue to move on to the third step, which in our mind is to actually define your territory. And this is a huge task. So Matt, how do you go about tackling that horrendous task, and where do hierarchies fit into that?
So that's not necessarily something that I'm doing in a silo. Executive leadership is defining out our strategies for the year. And so that helps me because I'm able to then create and align these territories based on a concept or a strategy that's kind of been laid out. And so, they're doing more of the creative work in that sense. And then it's my job to make sure that I'm doing my segmentation in accordance with the numbers that they're going to be looking at. And so really where I would start is make sure you're in clear communication across your org for everybody from go to market to sales ops to rev ops, executive leadership, marketing, and make sure that you're creating something that's going to have a direct alignment with their strategy and what's important to them. So that's where I would start. From there, once you've got a map and once you've got a game plan, you can go a couple different ways with it. Some people I've seen have a head count goal and they're trying to fit their strategies into that head count goal. Some people, it's the other way around. They're looking at their TAM first and then aligning their head count with what they think their market expectation is going to be. This is where you get into, I guess, different sales methodologies. The old school way was just throw more heads at it. So I like to go with a more data-driven approach. I like to use intent data from our marketing team and as much tools as possible to really get an idea of what's attainable, what's real. If we're going to take time, we're going to carve these territories, we're going to hire, we're going to pay out ramps. I want to make sure that we're doing our best to set everybody up for success as possible. So I think having a realistic idea of your TAM is probably the best start there.
Yeah, no, very good point. I think what we've heard from other companies too is that exercise, a lot of times what it looks like is that they've made the decisions, the executives have decided on the strategies, and then it comes down to trying to evenly equate those territories. And to do that, they look at that TAM, like you're saying, in the data and try to start scoring it. Say, is this even with their counterpart on next door on the next territory over kind of thing. But in order to do that, the data has to be up to date, right? So you've cleaned up the data. Now you have an understanding of the number of accounts in there. And one of the struggles always comes at when an account falls into a hierarchy. So for instance, I think we have a slide on this that we see this all the time where there's maybe two different territories. One is like the enterprise or strategic territory, and they're supposed to handle Walt Disney and Amazon and Apple. And another one is kind of the mid-market territory, and they're handling companies like Vizier or Optima and Hulu. And the struggle and the conflict comes because Hulu is part of Walt Disney. But that if you're just using the firmographic segmentation, the number of employees or the address, you're not going to understand that. And so You need to be able to take that into consideration in that data cleanup, but in that scoring algorithm too that you're using when you're carving those territories.
Yeah, and our model, again, being top-down hierarchy, owner owns the subs, at least for us. Once the data is in place, it makes it really easy to make those alignments, just all the way down. And they'll let us know if they need backup. If there's an instance where you've got either a needy customer or best problem to have is you just got too much going on, too many deals on the line and you need help, we can, resegment accordingly from there. But we always like to that's an easier conversation to have than, hey, I'm already swapping MSAs with these people. Turns out it's your account. Being invited into the deal is the preferred route of engagement there.
Absolutely, makes it so much easier. I know that we're running short on time, so let's dive over to tactic number 4, which in our mind is to automate your rules. Right? You've now cleaned up your database. You have these clear rules of engagement. You've defined your territory, so you understand what they are and what they aren't. And so one of the best ways to avoid other disputes is by automating as much as possible, right? We hear all the time that companies who manually assign records, there's just mistakes, right? If you're doing thousands of assignments, there's bound to be a couple mix-ups. But on top of that, you have these persuasive sales reps that learn pretty quickly that if they could drop off a nice bottle of wine on the desk of the SDR who's doing the manual assignment, they might get some more ops. And that, of course, can cause downstream effects. So, Matt, I know you're kind of in the midst of this right now. And yeah, maybe tell us about what you guys are doing for or embarking on for automating to make sure that you're avoiding those territory conflicts.
I wish I got a bottle of wine when I was on the phone. That'd have been great. Did not. So automation, I think wherever it can be implemented, of course, as long as it's effective, is the route that I've taken. It's been a long road. I'm still actually supporting a lot of the manual processes that we had in place before adopting some of this automation, because the automation also takes some time to build out. Yeah. And so now it's this balance struggle between supporting what was and getting enough bandwidth to build what should be. And back to my first point, get this in before territory planning season starts. That one is from personal experience, unfortunately. But so we've got 2 different strategies we're using. One is since we've had traction, I've been able to create some roll-ups that help me get a better idea of what I'm really looking at, like revenue or employee size. For an example, let's say we've got 10 different entities within the hierarchy. Maybe the parent company is, again, an equity holdings company. There's 20 people that work there, but they manage or are responsible for organizations in the hundreds or even thousands of employees. If you were to only look at that one account, you may not have a realistic idea of the opportunity within it. And so being able to take a total employee count of all of those individual organizations, stamp it on each of the accounts, including the main parent, makes reporting a lot easier to be able to segment from individual opportunity versus total opportunity available. And also helps balance out the accounts. Maybe you've got one rep with a company that's got 3 subs, all of them with 20,000 employees, and then maybe somebody else has 20 subs, and each of those maybe only have a couple hundred. At first, you could look at it and say, well, you got 30 accounts in this family, but you're gonna have to open up 30 different deals to actualize all of that opportunity, whereas this guy over here is going to have 3 that he's going to have to work through to get that. And so as much as you can to help cut this up a few different ways, I think is the best strategy you can have, being objective in that. And then, of course, being able to automate leads that are coming in to the guy who owns it and up to the top of the hierarchy. Will go back to avoiding paying the double dreaded commission there.
That's a really good point, actually. Leads, right? Leads are definitely a major source of account conflicts, because at some point, based on what the company's actions are, they might have an SDR responding to all leads, or they might assign it to the account owner. But at some point, it's getting assigned to a rep. When you convert that lead, you want to make sure that you understand, is it part of a bigger business, not just going off that individual record's firmographics, because it might say, like you said, that they have 200, 300 employees, but that if it's actually part of this business that has 10,000, if you've stamped that down on those records, like you said, your automation rules or even your manual assignment can get that over to the right person.
Yeah, I typically don't see teams fighting over accounts until there was a lead that got converted. That's when everybody cares if there's dupes or whatever else is going on. Nobody's scrubbing data until there's an op on it. So trying to get ahead of that as much as possible, I think, is going to save you time, frustration, money.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and the last bullet there on that slide was the reassignment. So that's an issue that everyone runs into as well, is that you have sales reps come and go all the time. So the territory might be built out, but once that sales rep leaves, you have to reassign those records. And that usually people are pretty good about assigning the ops, but the accounts and the leads that they own kind of fall by the wayside. So if you have this automated, you can have that updated automatically. And of course, then stem any further disputes down the road.
Agreed.
So yeah, I think because we're short on time, let's dive into number 5.
Okay.
Which is to give your entire team visibility into your hierarchy, and just to give them a clear line of sight. And I would say particularly in the situation where you haven't automated your rules, you want to be able to give everyone an understanding of where this account falls into so that they can make that decision of where they assign and avoid that up front, but also perhaps give them a source of truth for what they recognize as ownership. How does that play with the company you're at or previous, Matt?
So I've worked in environments where this visibility was available and places where it wasn't. And I overwhelmingly agree that having the visibility and as widespread as possible is better than not. And so there's a couple ways to break that down. One is user visibility. So who gets access to see it? And then the other side of that is where do you have this information stamped within your environment? And so I want everybody to be able to see it, not just the reps who own the accounts that they own, but being able to see absolutely everything. And then that ties back into the first rule of the mutual agreement. That shouldn't be an issue if everybody's on board with the rules. Of course, there are those, as you mentioned, who have particular abilities as it pertains to persuasion and ability to manipulate maybe what the data appears to be. But the more mutual consensus you've got, I think the better it is. And that way, you can get into chatter and have people hash it out and, hey, we agreed on this. Here's what I'm seeing. Does it look this way to you? Is there another argument here? Is there something we don't know about? Let's talk about this. And then I'm still fairly new into our onboarding of our data tools. And so right now we've got it on our accounts, but I can see where right now we've got our BDRs, like manually they'll see these leads and instead of before they convert them, go search within the org for company names or contact names, and then they'll be able to do all that. And so I think it'd be a big advantage to have that visibility on the lead, on the contact, on the account, and mitigate their manual data hunt, if you will. I think that'd save us a lot of time while we're building out the actual account routing automation piece of it.
That's such a good point, because we've actually heard from other customers that sales reps don't actually spend that much time on the account record in Salesforce. They go to the account in order to get to the opportunities or the contacts. Right. And so by putting that in place on those other records, I think you're right. They'll have a lot more exposure, a lot less argument to say they didn't know that this was part of a different account. And I think tactics for people on the phone, that you're probably used to that one little button to see the account hierarchy when you're on the account. But if you can expose that then on those other records, those leads, those contacts, those accounts, you'll be able to avoid those conversations, make sure everyone's aware. And then you have all these tertiary effects, right? By exposing that, they can immediately see cross-sell opportunities. Depending on how you set it up, you can see white space, meaning the accounts that exist in the Salesforce org that you haven't sold to yet. And ideally, if you're using a data provider like a Dun & Bradstreet who has that firmographic or that hierarchy data, you can now all of a sudden see the accounts that you don't have in your Salesforce environment. And now you can see these potentials for further sales. So that's a kind of added benefit.
Yeah, it's been a big help to us. We utilize the white space visibility, and we pretty much have our target accounts defined. So if it's not in our instance, it's not necessarily something we're targeting, but a lot of cases there's intermediaries that aren't as publicly visible where you may need to get influence to help move your deal forward. And so whoever's on your buying team isn't necessarily giving up visibility into all the steps they need to take to get the deal done. They're not being super transparent with you. This can be an advantage of help pointing you in the right direction of where you can get the additional buy-in you might need.
Yeah, good point. Great point. All right, well, we've gone through the 5 tactics, guys. So just to go through them really quickly, it was first provide that clear rule of engagement through that defined policy that Matt was suggesting. And afterwards, we'll send out a document that actually has some more suggestions for those policies. The second step was clean up your data, right? Link accounts together that are part of a hierarchy, clean up those duplicates, enrich it with the firmographics to make sure that they're all able to be scored, so that your next step, defining your territories, is a lot easier. You can score all those accounts. You can see where they fit in a hierarchy and score them appropriately. And then once you've got that defined, to set up your automated rules as best you can. Avoid those manual mistakes, get records assigned out, use automation to stamp all of the aggregate of those firmographics, the number of employees. Maybe it's address. Maybe you're always assigning based on the address of the global headquarters, but pull that down onto the child records in Salesforce. And then finally, expose it everywhere you can. Give everyone the best opportunity to avoid those commission splits. Put it on the lead record, put it on the contacts, the ops, the accounts, so that if you are doing manual assignment, everyone's aware of it. And Matt, so doing that and having seen it done at all the previous businesses, what are the benefits that you guys have found from taking those strategies?
Where to start? There's quite a bit. On the planning side, being able to confidently determine equitability within your segments, I think, is huge. That's going to get in front of a lot of potential issues down the road. Ramp time, I think, is a very understated benefit within this segment. A lot of this discussions around ops and planning, but I think ramp time is huge here, because these reps are confident that these are their accounts, that they can get started, they can start account planning, get up to speed, and they're not worried that this is going to move or something's going to happen here, and that they'll get a return on their investment. Outside of that, really the biggest benefit isn't directly related to this, but it's freeing up time to move on to other projects. Like, I feel like data cleaning is always going to be something that ops teams are going to have to deal with. But as more technology comes out, more automation's available, more innovation is out there to take advantage of, being able to have the bandwidth to look at other solutions and figure out how you can further create efficiencies just outside of territory planning and ops, I think is probably the biggest benefit, at least to me, especially in a fast scaling organization where, like at ADP, we had, hundreds of people on a sales ops team. I mean, they can just throw money at it, but a lot of faster scaling SaaS organizations, one, don't have that luxury, but two, just don't have the time. And as tech is evolving so fast, it's really an inefficient way of going about it. And there's solutions that can help you take advantage of all of this, most of them expensive, but far less than the cost of going the other route. And so really my biggest benefit has been bandwidth to step away from this and focus on other processes that really need that attention.
Yeah, fantastic. We've heard others say that using these has led to 80% or more than 80% reduction in the number of territory conflicts, giving you that time back. Well, somebody else said they could tell it was a success because the yelling just stopped, which we found hilarious because hopefully there isn't too much yelling going on, but certainly arguing for sure.
I hope to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then of course, anyone who does end up having to pay out the dreaded double commission splits will actually save some hard costs too.
Yeah, hopefully it's not 100%, and they can get to it in time to where they only have to pay out a smaller percentage because maybe it didn't get past that first discovery stage.
Yeah, totally. And then last but not least, of course, get your sales reps actually selling, spending the time creating deals and closing them instead of arguing over whose deal it is, right? That's something that I always hate to see amongst our team.
Absolutely.
Well, Matt, thank you so much. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, get your tools in place before your planning season. That's your biggest takeaway is create your agreements, but get your tools in place so you know what agreements to create and do this before you start your first quarter.
Such a good idea. All right. Well, thanks, Matt. So, Eduardo, should we open it up for Q&A?
Yes, we have some questions in the Q&A. Let me read the first one for you. First of all, thank you very much for this very organized presentation. Thank you, Matt, for your brain and ideas. Lisa Larson is asking, we refresh the data often and continue to have complaints about the data. The biggest complaint is around non-US accounts that have a US presence showing up as being headquarters in the US. What's the best way to get clean data?
So it was the biggest complaints around non-US accounts that have a US presence showing up as being headquartered in the US. Yeah, Matt, do you want to take that one or do you want me to?
I can briefly attempt it. So we segment based on, international teams, of course, and we let our US team run with US divisions and our international team run with international divisions, and really just settle it based on where the buying team's located and where the team that's going to be supporting the product is located. If the problem, though, if I understand it correctly, is that the headquarters is elsewhere, but it's showing up as a US headquarter, I would try looking at getting better enrichment data on your accounts. Maybe you're looking at the domestic ultimate versus the global ultimate. If you're getting the wrong global ultimate, then maybe the address data is rough on the accounts. In worst case scenario, look at other vendors and see if you're getting the same issue.
Yeah, good point. I mean, data source is always a struggle, that you want to have like the best data you can outside of North America. There's different data providers that are best, particularly when you get into Asia Pac and whatnot, that you might need multiple. But I think the most important thing is you need to have a clear definition of what your source of truth is, because anyone can go out and Google and find 15 different answers for employee count, for address, that kind of thing. And so if you define it that you're going with Dun & Bradstreet, let's say, that you can go find a different answer on LinkedIn or whatever, some other source, but that's our source of truth and that's what we're going to follow. Some companies even just lock their territories for the year, knowing that there's going to be changes. Say, hey, next year we'll make that change, but for this year and the remaining of the fiscal, you have to follow this territory definition.
Yeah, put that in your rules. And the source of truth, like agreement, everybody agrees this is our source of truth. I need a yes from you, a yes from you, a yes from you. Yeah,
because no data source is perfect, right? You're always going to find edge cases.
The persuasive rep will find it for sure.
We only have 10 minutes left, so we're going to get to as many questions as we can. And then if any question is left unanswered, we can answer them in the follow-up. Cliff is asking us, do you not me, because I'm not the expert. So Cliff is asking you, do you generally recommend making quotas equal by changing territory lines, or pick territories that make sense and then adjust quota for that territory?
Matt, I'd love to hear what you have to say there.
Can you read it again for me?
Yes. Do you generally recommend making quotas equal by changing territory lines, or pick territories that make sense and then adjust quota for that territory?
So we go with the quota first. Of course, that's based on as much data as we can get regarding the TAM, and so we go with the quota first and then build the territories to reflect that quota. Maybe within your commercial segment, you've got, there's a gray area under enterprise. You've got, really small companies, and you've got mid-sized companies that still aren't quite enterprise. And so reps selling into those shouldn't necessarily have the same quota, and you want to make sure you're giving them enough to hit the quota that you're trying to have them. So we start with the TAM, go to the quota, and then make sure, based on as much data as we can get, based on previous ops, close percentages, TAM analysis, that we're giving them a territory that makes sense for that number.
Yeah, and I totally agree, Matt, that in my experience, if you make the quotas uneven, particularly if it's not in a different segment, that you'll get a lot of very frustrated reps that are armed with an ability to argue that it wasn't fair. Yeah. Right? That they didn't have the same opportunity to hit their quota. And not just that, but by setting your quotas at the same level, at least per segment, you also create some competition, right? That, hey, everyone's on an even playing field. We're all allegedly.
Yeah, right.
We want to hear those reps that are crushing it. It motivates others. It motivates them to see what's possible. And that obviously it puts the onus on making an equitable territory, and which isn't an easy exercise. Hopefully some of the tactics we gave you today will help. But that if you've done that, now all of a sudden you can foster a really healthy team environment. Whereas if you make your quotas different, it fosters a lot of frustration and negativity amongst the team.
It makes sense. We have another question here. Chris is asking, how do you actually link hierarchies together? What does that process look like?
A couple of different ways to skin that cat. If you're using a tool like Tractions, the visibility at least will automate such that you can see the trees, but it's going to be, unless you set the rules in place, on you to actually move them around, and that needs to align with your strategy. Back to the international example, if you just do a top-down mastery assignment, hey, whoever owns this owns the rest of them. Maybe, it's Honda or Nissan or something. It's based in Japan, and now you've got your guy over in Japan calling, Honda Motors USA or Toyota USA. Toyota's got a huge American footprint, and so you want to make sure that you're using those hierarchies to align everything, still kind of based on your strategy. Hey, buddy gets everything in Japan, and then the biggest account in US we're going to use to determine that segment. Maybe Honda in Japan is however many billions in revenue, and maybe America it's even larger. So your Japanese guy maybe is an enterprise rep, your American guy maybe that's a strategic rep. So linking those hierarchies is going to be kind of up to you and what your strategy is. It can be as automated as you want it to be, but depending on your company strategy as a whole for your go-to-market, you might want to slow down and take a little more time to put your links together.
Yeah, Totally. I'm biased, obviously, but the easiest way to link hierarchies, particularly when you have hundreds of thousands, 50,000, 100,000 million account records, is you first need to have a referential data set, right? Somebody that's telling you whether an account is part of a bigger business. And so once you have that, then you can start to automate. You can start to link those accounts together based on what's usually a legal hierarchy, right? So D&B does a great job. There's certainly other providers out there that also have hierarchy data, but the idea is that they've gone to the effort of saying, hey, Ivanti is part of Honeywell, or Hulu is part of Walt Disney. And then you use that instruction set to link them all together as step one, because now you've crawled through all 50,000, 100,000 million records, and you've got a baseline. And then back to Matt, what Matt said at the beginning was, if you have any different rules of engagement, like how do you treat these holdings companies, all of those private equity firms or the Berkshire Hathaways of the world, if you treat them differently, then you can go and make adjustments. Some of them you can automate based on industry. Others you need to go and curate yourself. And if you are curating them, so if you're going through to say, hey, I'm going to pull Geico out of Berkshire Hathaway and Benjamin Moore, et cetera, to keep them separate because one's insurance, one is retail, one's a railway transportation company, that you pull those out and they're maintained independently. And then, of course, you can score them and assign them separately. So it gives you that flexibility, but at least gets you a massive leg up, because there's just no way you can go through and manually link accounts that are when you have thousands and thousands of records. By the time you got through it, they'd already be out of date.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking. Linking, important to note there, linking and assigning are two different things. So if your question is, how do you link them? A lot of these software will do that for you. Traction will do that for you. I know Discover.org and ZoomInfo can do that for you. There's others. I think Sixth Sense is trying to come out with something that'll do that for you. But the assignment part is really where I think it gets complicated. The software will give you the visibility pretty much overnight, and it'll do it on its own. It'll just match your accounts and then run the scripts, put the links on there. But it's, how do you assign it after you now have this visibility? That's really the tough part in that equation, and that you're going to have to align with whatever your strategy is.
This is great. We don't have times for any more questions, but the Traction Complete team will make sure to answer all of them in the follow-up. I'm going to wrap things up here, but first I want to say thank you for all attendees to be here with us today. I hope we enjoyed the weekend. We love having you here. And thank you, Traction Complete, for making this event possible. This webinar was really good, really thought out, and the content here was amazing. And thank you, of course, to our speakers, David and Matt. You are great. And while we hang out backstage, the MSP team will make sure that you will find the recordings very soon in the MSP website with the key takeaways, some resources, and you can also check the previous masterclass that Traction Complete hosted with us, and the future masterclasses will be there too. So make sure you check our website. Thank you, David, and thank you, Matt. Let's hang out backstage while the team works on the follow-up. Bye-bye, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Eduardo. And keep your eyes peeled, everyone, for a tactical checklist that we'll send out, including all those subtasks that we just talked about. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or want to find out more, please get in touch, and we're happy to chat through your specific business case.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.